Welcome to the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number 146, being recorded on a very chilly Wednesday night. Wednesday, January 15th, 2025 at 10:31 p.m. My throat is a little dry, so if I stop to get a sip of water, just bear with me. I'm not going to edit out all the moments of silence. But just know that's what is happening. But yes, very chilly tonight. But it's great. It's great staying in weather. There is no way you would want to go out on a night like this, let alone it being a weeknight. Many of us have to wake up early if we work in the morning. But if I get a call right now or I get a text that says, "Hey man, let's hang out tonight," blah blah blah, this or that, I'm like, brother, that is not even remotely on the schedule. We must stay true to life's goals and life's dreams and ambitions. And it's been a hell of a ride lately. It's been very, very busy this past couple of weeks, on top of getting sick. So much to do. Personal responsibilities, artistic responsibilities. There have been sacrifices which had to have been made, unfortunately, and they are appropriately called sacrifices. It has just been so busy lately, and it has not slowed down. But even so much so to even get this episode out, I was sitting here, man, and I'm like, Wednesday is my cutoff day before, Thursday is the earliest I can record a new episode, and Wednesday is the latest I can. And sometimes it comes down to the wire like this, where I got about another hour and a half. So I was getting some stuff done. I said, oh my gosh, I didn't even record an episode. That's completely insane. So here I am sitting here with this delicious cup of water. And I'm going to be talking about some films, going to be talking about some literature, life, all that good stuff. This is the cozy corner of cinema after all. I want to give you that cozy kind of atmosphere, that cozy kind of mentality, the kind of show that you get a nice hot beverage, some cocoa, some tea, some coffee. If you're staying up late, or if you're drinking late, maybe some decaf, some herbal tea. And really just kind of, or if you're in the car, driving somewhere, you're at work, or maybe you're just getting some errands done. I want this show to kind of be like, hey, maybe you listen to a little bit of it, you tune out, maybe you listen to some of it, maybe you don't, you can take the show however which way you can, but, I try to keep a kind of content and cozy atmosphere, whether or not I succeed is completely in the eye of the beholder. Whether you enjoy the show or not is your prerogative. I can't really change that outcome. But all I can do is just keep on talking to this microphone and just keeping the conversation going. So previously I talked about the book Wired, about the life of John Belushi. Well, the book has since been completed, and there's been something of a mini John Belushi film festival, somewhat consciously, somewhat unconsciously, mostly consciously though, I would say, because having finished that book, I wanted to, one, rewatch some of his work, and two, watch some of his work in relation to his life. And so I suppose, let me get a full actual list here. If you want to pull up the thing. So I want to start, I guess I'll start sort of, maybe not quite in order, but I will start with his last big... Now, was this his last film? I gotta actually check on this, because... Or at least last starring role, undoubtedly. I'm talking about Neighbors from 1981. Directed by... Let me get the name here. I'm blanking on the name right now. John Avildsen. Director of Rocky. Director of The Karate Kid. and a notoriously difficult film production, as detailed in the book. In that, Neighbors is a fascinating film, and I should also say that yes, this is his last film. We follow him and Dan Aykroyd. John Belushi is playing straight-laced Earl Keese. He leads a very bland, pretty unhappy life. He lives in his nice house at the end of a barren street. The only thing that's really there is another house that is across the street. But he lives with his wife, played by Catherine Walker, who undermines him, demeans him, does not like him really. And if that's not bad enough, he's got new neighbors. Of course, in the title of the film, played by Dan Aykroyd and Kathy Moriarty. And it's difficult to watch this film on its own merit. I mean, this is a film that is solely watched for the contextual sake. It's not a film I've ever had the urge to seek out, rather than it being either very different contexts, whether it be in the context of a John Avildsen film or a Belushi film or an Aykroyd film. And in this case, it's a Belushi film. Knowing the troubled production on this film, Belushi's severe drug use, his relapsing after going clean for a film I'll talk about a little bit later. And in that case, it's very easy to see where a lot of the frustration came out from Belushi in the final cut of this film. I should say even before the final cut, in the test showings of the film. It's not that the performances are bad. In fact, I think all the performances are actually good. I think John Belushi plays the straight man very well, and I like that idea of wanting to flip the traditional kind of characters that you would expect. It'd be like Chris Farley and David Spade swapping characters for a film. And Dan Aykroyd, I forgot where exactly I read, but I believe he said something along the lines. That's great. The audio starts playing while I'm trying to record something. He was saying that he doesn't think he went far enough in his portrayal of this character Vic, who right from the start, it's not even just that he's too he's too kind of like he doesn't get social cues or anything like that. He's just rude to John Belushi right from the start. He's just making himself at home, walking in the house. He's kind of not quite guilting him into getting takeout, but he's basically saying it's a whole good back and forth, but the frustration that Belushi had in the book about it not being funny really kind of comes through, because it's a fine enough film, but it's not particularly funny in that it's not that the jokes don't work, it's that there's not a lot of jokes. It's like they have all the setup, and then there's no real payoff, which is fine. You can have a dry kind of comedy like this, but because the first part of this film, it is very straight in the way that Belushi and Walker play it, that when you get these eccentric characters, we have Kathy Moriarty, who is seemingly hitting on Earl. She's being very straightforward with him. The situations themselves could be funny, but the script and the directing does not really lend itself well to it. I think Avildsen is a very talented filmmaker, but the general troubled production, the producer whose name I am blanking on right now, I do apologize, having problems with Avildsen directing, Avildsen being very perhaps difficult to work with, ultimately culminated in not quite the swan song that would put Belushi back kind of into the limelight. If this had not been his final film, then I think this would be what it kind of is now, which is essentially a interesting contextual footnote into the life of Belushi. The only advantage that it has in not being completely forgettable is that the production itself, and well, I guess even more so than the production itself, because that would have gone without saying, but with it being the final film of Belushi, because he was very adamant about getting his film Noble Rot made the script, from all accounts of everything that I've read, or everything, the book really kind of emphasizes this, and apparently so. It's a real mess of a script. Lots of big problems. They wanted to put him in another film called The Joy of Sex that he really did not want to be in. All this culminating with his continual drug use eventually would lead to his death of an overdose just a year after the release of Neighbors. Actually, I think it was only a few. It must have. I think, from what I can remember, I think it was released in December of '81, and he passed away in March of '82. And then from there, Aykroyd would go on to, he wanted Belushi to be in Ghostbusters, but of course that was not finished at the time. So it's all, I think there was something else that you wanted him into. I can't remember what it was, or maybe somebody else did. I don't remember. But this leads into the second film of this mini Belushi Film Festival. The controversial film, which I had talked briefly about last time, which I was unfamiliar with in terms of the actual controversy behind it, from 1989, directed by Larry Pierce, is the, I would not say film adaptation, I would say loosely based upon the book Wired. The film is just called Wired, and I was unfamiliar with exactly the controversy behind this. I knew it was a biography about Belushi, and I didn't know much more than that. Or if I did, then I must have completely forgotten it when I started watching it, because I was watching the film, and it's a film that's had a tricky release history. It got a release in 1989 to much controversy, was released on VHS, and has not been released on DVD since, or Blu-ray since. A lot of close friends and family members of John were very adamant against the release of the film, against the making of the film. Because what we have here is we have Michael Chiklis playing John Belushi in an alternate sort of, not quite It's a Wonderful Life version, but I guess that would be a bit of a comparison. We have a character who, in this case, has, for one, being a real person, two, has actually, has died, and he comes back from the dead to look upon significant moments of his acting career before his eventual downfall into drugs. And bizarrely enough, they'd actually decide to make Bob Woodward, the author of Wired, a character played by J.T. Walsh. And in that regard, it's an incredibly bizarre film, to say the least. It goes without saying that it's in very bad taste to kind of make this kind of film about a real person. I think it would have been much more appropriate to make a Belushi-type character, an actor or a comedic actor who perhaps rode too close to the sun, or flew too close to the sun, and doing a fictionalized account of that, while also perhaps being lightly inspired. I think there's enough wiggle room there to do something like a Belushi-type story, but having it actually be Belushi, it's very strange of a decision to do, but once you kind of get past that, I don't think the filmmaking is actually all that bad. I think, unfortunately, just the bizarre kind of choice to do the film at all, and the controversy around it has overshadowed the actual film itself. I think the first half is where it really stumbles. The tone is really bizarre. It's going for really silly kind of goofy kind of stuff. It's recreating a lot of Belushi's notable performances. Him as the samurai was a part where they recreate the food fight scene, or of him grabbing the food from Animal House, which even in the book it said that Landis directed that intentionally with the script, and I've always heard that it was not, that was all improvised, but truthfully I don't know, and I haven't done the research to kind of back that up one way or another. But the fact that in the film as well they portray a Landis type director on the set of I don't know if they even say Animal House or not, but I think the second half, when it gets to really the the really kind of nightmarish drug use, is where the directing really comes through. It has this really hallucinogenic nightmarish kind of editing that really puts you in the state of Belushi, of just kind of the timeline at this point is all over the place, for good and for bad. It's trying to do a lot. It's trying to take a lot directly from the book, talking about noble rot and the joy of sex and his frustration. And it doesn't all come across all that well. I will say, above all else, I think Michael Chiklis actually gives a very good performance, and it was fascinating listening to interviews with him. One, around the time that the film came out, and then two, the mid 2000s, I think. This was after he kind of bounced back. Well, I would say, he had bounced back in a way that got him a lot of acclaim in something like The Shield, the television show. Which I've never seen, but I know he's kind of known for that, as well as being in the Fantastic Four movies. I think he's kind of successfully overshadowed him being in this film, but it's interesting kind of hearing his perspective on it, of him getting this big breakthrough, and the people who he had looked up to and who inspired him immediately out of the gate hated him without any real kind of understanding and real perspective. I mean, it's an interesting double interview. I would say you can go on YouTube and look these up. It's very fascinating. But he gives a good performance when he has to really emote, when he has to yell. He's got that sort of dryness in his throat that, as I'm reading the book, it's almost like you can hear it. He really is able to emote like Belushi without doing just an impression, which I think was actually a good choice, whether intentional or not, to not just do an impression, but to actually kind of put his own kind of, not even want to say unique take, as if you're changing who that person was, but it's not, you're not just watching it going like, okay, this is somebody just dressing up like Belushi. He gives it its own, and it's just a shame that he had to kind of be roped into the controversy of this, because I don't think it's a terrible film. I think just that it being in bad taste will overshadow the actual qualities of it. But with that said, I mean, as a curiosity piece, it's, you watch it for that context of it just being an anomaly of a film, but I think it's also important to not just kind of fall into the social sort of general conversation, to kind of get your own perspective on the film. Any kind of film like this that has a lot of notoriety behind it, and to kind of see what else is going on there. Because like I said, I think the filmmaking at times is very good. I really don't think this film is some poorly made, just across the board, just poorly acted film. It's just unfortunate of just the way they, the cause of the film, but worth watching, I would say, in that regard, for that context. And then, so jumping ahead a little bit, well, I should say a lot of it, in 2020, the Showtime documentary, simply called Belushi, feels like the proper kind of honest tribute to Belushi. It spends far, far more of the time in just how successful and how charismatic he could be, and sort of more so the kind of the addictive personality he had, that if he could have beat or got over, just how much more he could have done. He died very young. Somebody who was very addictive, and I don't remember if it was in this film or in the book that they say that ultimately, for somebody like John, it was going to just happen at some point, no matter what you could do. If you're being surrounded by people who are enabling you, who are saying that you have to be the kind of big crazy guy, who are taking uppers and downers to kind of get with these characters, if it's not gonna be a problem this time, then it'll be a problem next time, and if it's not the next time, it's time after that. But this film really goes over just how strong of a comedian that he was, how good he was at adapting, but also as well, how frustrating it could be, how difficult it could be at times. It's a loving tribute, but I think it's a very fair tribute, because it's difficult to kind of put and it's difficult to kind of just make something like that's solely just praising, because even in the highest of highs there is that kind of shadow, that kind of darkness that creeps in. And because the film, I think, spends much more time, I'd say 80% of it, as the person, as the husband, the boyfriend, the friend, being a really loving and caring guy, but then can be also incredibly difficult. That's a far more honest and less sensationalized kind of portrayal of somebody who was doomed to go off the deep end, just really kind of spiral out of control. I think Wired, for what it is, has been called a lot of things as a book, but I think what it does show is almost the tiring excess of just constantly needing, drugs, just constantly uppers and downers, and then if that's not enough, to go for the next step and the next step, and taking speedballs and the excessive drinking. And especially in, like, I would, in part three of that book, when it really goes into a full force of just a day after day after day, it's at that kind of rate, it's not really too much of a surprise, the outcome, and the people involved in his life knew that, but it's still just knowing that it's so final, really kind of puts the nail in it all. But it's a very good documentary. It is all narrated. It's all archival footage, which is great. There's a lot of really great footage in here. It would pair well with the Love Gilda documentary that I talked about a little while ago. I do like this more than the Love Gilda one. I think the Love Gilda one is far more informative. But the Belushi one, I think, is far more loving, but also far more complex, because Belushi is just such an interesting guy. I think anyone who dies young, whether it be from an accidental, overdose, or it be, someone like James Dean in a car accident, or, suicide, or anything like that. I think not just the possibility of what if, what could have they done after the fact, but more so what they accomplished just in that short period of time to be so universally known. And when I say known, I'm not talking about fame. I'm talking about just, like, somebody like Belushi, who at 32 just had, had such a distinct name for himself, even at that time, is so fascinating. So, I don't know if this even has a physical release or not. And I remember when this first came out, I was actually a little tricky to find because it was only on Showtime, and I'm thinking, brother, I am not signing up for Showtime just for one documentary, man. That's completely ridiculous. But should you come across it, I think it's well worth your time. A very loving and nuanced portrait of John. And the last two, I think, are kind of, they were unintentional in that I did not think I was going to watch these, but it actually kind of worked out, and actually would end the film festival on higher notes. One of the films that had been mentioned quite a bit in terms of him as an actor and him getting clean was his 1981 film, Continental Divide. Which was a romantic comedy starring him and Blair Brown, written by Lawrence Kasdan, directed by Michael Apted. And the film itself as well, I think, had Belushi lived longer, it would be, like Neighbors, an interesting footnote. I don't think the film is particularly very good. I think that John is very good in it. Playing this kind of journalist right from the start. He has his natural kind of charisma of just him being able to be funny behind a desk without having to do a whole lot, just his interactions. And even later on, being a good romantic lead. I haven't rewatched Old Boyfriends in some time. I've only ever seen that film once, and I remember him playing, I think, a bit more of a comedic, romantic kind of character in that, but it's been a little while since I've seen it. But this film, I think, was a good kind of portrait at the possibilities of somebody like him. So it's interesting to kind of pair this with Neighbors, of him doing more straight-laced roles. Now with Neighbors, eventually it does go not quite off the deep end, but there is a point where that the kind of the bigger comedic version of Belushi does come out at times, and because that is a bigger kind of more overt comedy, you're gonna have that more so than in just a romantic comedy like this. It's an interesting film in that regard, but the film itself, it's not something that I would ever revisit. I think it's just far too bizarrely enough. It's only 103 minutes. But boy, oh boy, did it feel longer than that. The pacing is really, really off on this film, man. I mean, I thought the film was wrapping up, and I'm sitting there like, man, this is still going on. And I had to have guessed that it would have, I think it went on for about another half hour or so. It doesn't all totally mesh, but I think that a lot of the scenes with Belushi and Brown are very good together. I really liked all of the stuff of them up in the mountains. Blair Brown is playing I forgot what she did exactly. She was like a bird kind of expert or something like that, man. Yeah, an eagle researcher. So they have a good chemistry back and forth, and even still, that there is a little bit of that Belushiism where he's being a little pushy, but it feels more grounded and it feels more kind of like somebody not quite maybe totally down to earth in a way where you'd be like, what the hell, what are you doing, man? But in this film, I think it all totally works with what he's doing. So an interesting film in that regard. And then, of course, I did not even intend to rewatch Animal House, but I did. I was in the mood to watch it because I had it on my mind, and I haven't seen it in years, and it hasn't aged a day, man. I think it's just one of the great '70s comedies. And I think people forget just how much Belushi is not in it. I mean, there are long stretches where he is not in it. We are following other characters, man. We're following just myriad other of the students at this college, man. I mean, one of the ones who really kind of steals a lot of the film is Stephen First, who is just disgruntled the whole movie, and the way that Mark Metcalf's character is just constantly messing with him, playing this kind of sadistic sort of leader. It's just so funny, man. It's one of these films. It's another one of these films you can just throw on and you can watch just 10, 15 minutes of it, and you'll feel good, man. It's a film that's the narrative really isn't all that important. It's a lot of gags. There's a lot of big scenes going on. And I guess I think it's just something about these really kind of crazy comedies by taking the absurdity just to the max, but still being really funny, man, on its own. I mean, the whole entire end in the parade is just, I mean, it just goes on and on. It's like in the Blues Brothers, man. It's like that car chase. You're just like, my gosh, I can't even imagine trying to get this all together. Just simple gags like steering a marching band into an alley. Like it's a dead end, and they just keep walking into a wall. It's so silly, yet it's so funny. And these cars crashing into each other. It's so hectic. It's just like a madhouse, man. But Landis knew what he was doing, man. I mean, Landis knew how to get really good performances out of just like this wild cast of characters, and even the side characters are playing it smaller. Donald Sutherland's really good in the film, and young Karen Allen is good. It's a film that is interesting as well to kind of talk about, where National Lampoon sort of were struggled after this film to kind of regain the sort of momentum that this had until Vacation, because they had I think they followed this up with Movie Madness, but I forgot the original name of it, but which is not an anthology, but it's a 3-story film, or 3 or 4-story, and it's just not very good. It's very forgettable. But there it is, man. Neighbors, Wired, Belushi, Continental Divide, and Animal House. This is great to read this literature, to put these films back into the social milieu, to put them back into context, and look at them with a newfound appreciation for somebody like John Belushi. So raise your glass to John Belushi. If you don't have a glass, well, raise your metaphorical one. Because here at the Cozy Corner of Cinema, we're definitely John Belushi fans. I say plural, it's just me, so I'm a John Belushi fan. But anyways, guys, I'm completely running out of time. Thank you so much for listening. God bless, take care, and until next time.